Hello viewers, welcome back to the Moose Mobile Auto Repair channel, and I hope you guys are doing well. And today I'm continuing part 2 of this 2010 Subaru Outback, and it has the 3.6 liter engine. And today we are doing the rear brakes, rotors, and pads. And unfortunately, I lost the audio in the entire video while doing the rear brakes. So I will have to do the voiceover version. So anyhow, I was using a 14 millimeter wrench, and I got the two bolts off for the caliper, and you can see that there was a piece of rust piece from the inboard brake pad that was stuck onto the caliper piston. So now I'm showing on how to check the caliper piston for any brake fluid leakage. I'm using a thin slotted screwdriver to lift the dust boot seal to see if there's any brake fluid, just to make sure the piston is okay, because the piston has pretty much almost went through its full travel, just almost there. So there was a high chance that that it could have leaked out brake fluid. So I was just doing my due diligence to make sure that the caliper is still okay. And now I successfully was able to push the piston all the way in with the brake spreader tool. You can also use a C-clamp or a channel lock or something like that to push the pistons in. So now the brake pads are stuck, so I'm using a small pry bar and a hammer to get the brake pads out. And these brakes are just awfully bad. The customer was driving on the metal for a considerably long time, and so they were just completely overdue for for brake replacement. So I'm just I'm getting the pads out, and I showed you earlier that that this thing has been driven on the metal for an extended amount of time, to the point where there's no more friction material left. And so you can see that the brake rotor is like completely rotted. It just it's really bad. So now I'm checking the slider pins. The slider pins were not seized on this side, but they were seized on the other side, in which I had to use the torch. But I didn't show that in this video, because this was the one side where it was not seized, but everything else was seized. So anyhow, I'm using a 14 millimeter wrench to remove the caliper bracket assembly. There's two 14s. I'm using a long wrench to give me some extra leverage. So after you get the bolts loose and taken out, I use a hammer to just tap on the bracket so I am able to get it out. And over here, I'm kind of blocking the view a little bit. So I'm getting the bolts out now. I stated earlier that if the brakes are ever like this, it's not going to be an easy brake job with a bunch of rust here, because of high chance of seized pins and other components. So I used the hammer, the BFH hammer, and I got the bracket out, and the bottom of the backing plate just disintegrated just because of the rust. So I wasn't surprised on that, but yeah, the bottom part came off, and now I'm just hitting the hub to get the rotor out. Now, if the rotor does not come out easy, you might have to back off the adjuster, the star wheel adjuster uh, at the bottom to bring the shoes inside so that you're able to get the rotor out. But in this case, I didn't have to do that, and so now I'm just cleaning all the rust off. And here I'm just having a quick look at the wheel bearing to make sure there's no noise or any play or anything. And so now I believe I take a wire brush to clean everything and the rest of the backing plate. But later in the video, that backing plate breaks off because of too much rust. So at the end, there were no backing plates at the end on both sides because it was just too rotted out to keep it on, because it was just going to cause problems and rub against the new rotor and cause noise and other issues. So I just removed the whole thing off. So so right now I'm using the die grinder with the 3-inch roll-off sanding pad to clean the hub. So I'm just using a bunch of tools just to sand down and to clean the hub and the studs and all the rust. You want to make sure you give it a good clean. So now I'm just servicing the parking brake shoes. These shoes are electronic. This vehicle has an electronic uh, parking brake, so you don't need to do anything with that part. You just service the shoes as normal. You only need to disable the electronic parking brake when you are replacing the shoes on this particular vehicle. So anyhow, I'm just sanding down the shoes and I'm cleaning everything up, and then later on I lubricate the contact points on the backing plate. There's 3 on each side, and I also lubricate the star wheel uh, adjuster. So now I'm just washing everything down with brake cleaner. And you can see where I'm spraying the brake cleaner, there's a big hole in the back of the backing plate. So I get rid of it later on, close to the end, but I don't think I show it. So I'm cleaning everything down and all the rust, and just trying my best. And I had a really long day that day, and I had a couple cars or so. And so I was working late in the afternoon. So I was trying to get everything done before the sun uh, went down, before the sun goes down. So now I'm using a slotted screwdriver just to push away the shoes so that I'm able to get into the contact points. I was spraying some fluid film to get behind there to prevent the shoes from seizing up in the future. These shoes were a little bit stuck, so I had to somewhat free them up so that they are moving properly, because this design is in which they call it a hat design, because the rotor, it looks like a hat, and the it's incorporated with the parking brake shoes in the inside. So if there's any issue with the parking brake shoes, it's gonna cause issues with the regular brakes, because these shoes are inside the rotor, and so there's a possibility that it could make a noise. So you gotta make sure you service this correctly, otherwise you you may have problems. So make sure you clean everything well so that there's no issues later down the road. And so now I just I lubricate the springs and stuff, and where the shoes meet, and I lubricated the hub. So I didn't need to adjust the parking brake really. The parking brake seems to work okay, so I left it alone. I didn't want to touch any more things than what I needed to, because this vehicle is already is falling apart, and so I didn't want to open any cans of worms here, because um, I really had to get this job done and needed the customer to be on their way. I'm still doing the job properly and correctly, but I just didn't want any problems with this vehicle. So now I'm spraying some disc brake quiet from Permatex. It was running low. The can was near empty, pretty much empty. This prevents noise in caliper hopping, so it helps a little bit to absorb some of the vibration. So it's not bad of an idea to use it on the backing of the brake pads. And so after I sprayed it down, you probably have to wait like 5 or 10 minutes for the pads to dry up. And now I'm just cleaning the brake rotor down with some brake cleaner, because on 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 most of the rotors, the manufacturers, they coat the rotors with some oil to prevent rust during packaging and shipment. And so you need to clean those residual oils on the brake rotor surface so that it doesn't contaminate the new brake pads on the friction material. So we gotta make sure you clean the rotor well. So now I'm just installing the new rotor. Just make sure you install the rubber cap or the grommet that goes back in there, because you don't want dirt or water or moisture or anything to get inside. And so I know that some guys they discard that, which is a bad idea. You should make sure that you put it back, because because water and dirt and stuff can get inside, and can cause problems with the parking brake components. So make sure you put the rubber piece back in there. Now this one was easy to put back on, but if you're having a difficult time, you can spray some silicone spray or fluid film, or some kind of a lubricant, so that it would go in the rotor without any issues. So now I'm just cleaning the rust on the caliper bracket, on the contact points, on where the clips and the pads are going to sit in. Just make sure you clean the rust fairly well, because if you don't, you might have some trouble trying to install the brake pads. So you don't need to get it down like completely to like the bare metal, but you need to make sure that you get pretty much all the rust off. So now I'm just cleaning the outer portion on where the boots are going to see in. And so now, because this vehicle is very, like the brakes were very rusty, um, I cleaned the bore of both of the caliper bracket because there was a lot of rust inside. So I cleaned everything out. I sprayed some brake cleaner and I cleaned it out. I didn't. I wanted to make sure that there was no dirt or debris or anything inside there that would cause problems with the braking. So over here, I'm lubricating the lip on where the boots are going to go in. So I made sure I lubricated them so that they go in uh, easily. And I was running out of supplies on the green caliper grease. I didn't have that much left. So I was trying to make sure that I use all of them. So now I installed both boots, and I'm also using brand new pins as well, because uh, the whole braking system, all the pins were all like badly rusted and pitted, and they were not really reusable. So I just made sure I use all new pins and all new boots, so that I won't have any issues uh, with this vehicle. So make sure you put a generous amount of grease on the pins and lubricate it. You may have to take it out and lubricate it again, because I cleaned it out with a brake cleaner. So there's no leftover grease that's inside the bracket. So you probably have to add some more grease than usual compared to your typical average brake job. And so now I'm lubricating the bottom pin, and make sure you lubricate that area, the recessed area in which you install the black boot inside. Make sure that area is well lubricated, because this is going to help that area to slide better when it's inside the caliper. So you want to make sure that it's lubricated extremely well. That's very uh, important. Now over here, I'm using the screwdriver just to push back on the boot to to get rid of any any excess lubricant, because sometimes there can be an airlock in the boots, so you gotta make sure you. Usually, I pull back on the boots because sometimes I've had issues with the brakes because there was an airlock in the boot, and so you gotta make sure that you pull back on the boot to get any excess grease out. Otherwise, when you go for a road test, you might have some issues with the vehicle pulling to one side. So anyhow, I lubricated the caliper bracket with the orange silicone ceramic grease, and this grease is very good for high temperature applications. I just don't use it on the pins because they often dry out. So I just use it on the caliper bracket uh, alone. And so now I'm just cleaning the rust on the bolts for the caliper, the the mounting bolts for the caliper bracket. So now I'm installing the bracket. I'm uh, I'm in the way of the picture. I apologize. I will put the torque spec on the screen for this one. So I'm trying to line up the bracket and and get the bolts in. The weather was getting colder, and also the it was getting dark as well. And you can see the backing plate is starting to come apart now, and so I remove it later on. I don't think I show it in the video though. So now I'm tightening up the bolts here, and then later I use a wrench. I just use my Ugga Dugga uh, torque spec. You can give it two or three Ugga Duggas, and then I think you're good to go. But if you want to, just for safety, you can use a torque wrench and torque these bolts to the proper spec. So now I'm lubricating the brake pads, the contact points on the pads, and then I just install them. I did have some issues with the clips, and I sometimes had to use a slotted screwdriver to hold the clip in place so I can get the brake pad in, or the brake pads in. Um, yeah, after you get that in and the pads are moving freely, you want to make sure that you move the pads a little bit just to make sure it's moving, because it shouldn't be stuck on there. You gotta make sure the pads are moving freely. You can check that by wiggling it a, a little bit before you put the caliper on. Um, if the pads don't move, then you might have to take the caliper bracket out again and clean a bit more of the rust on the contact points and redo it. So now I'm installing the caliper now. I'm going to put the torque spec on the screen. I believe it's 20 foot-pounds. So now, if you're having trouble tightening the bolts all the way, you may have to use a pair of vice grips or a wrench to put onto the slider pin. Just be careful you don't damage the new boots. Just be careful. And so while the vice grip is on, you can tighten it up. You might have to do that sometimes. So now after you tighten everything up, just make sure that that you push back on the boot. Make sure there's no excess grease. Get rid of all the excess grease that may be in there, because as I said earlier, that it's possible to have an airlock in there. So you want to make sure that's okay. And then here I'm showing that to make sure that the brake line, the flex hose, is parallel to the caliper. Because if it's not parallel to the caliper and if it's twisted in any way, shape, or form, you could have a brake failure if you don't see that. So make sure that the brake line is always parallel to the caliper. And at the end, I get rid of the backing plate because it was too loose and rubbing against the rotor. And so I removed it. Make sure you spin the rotor. Make sure everything is moves freely, and push the caliper back and forth. Make sure everything is moving, and you can use some brake cleaner to wipe down any dirt or leftover grease that may be on the rotor. That's it for today. The other side is the same exact thing, so I'm not going to be showing that. If you guys enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please don't forget to give it a like, and please consider subscribing to my channel if you liked this video, and or if you liked any of my other videos. And I'll see you guys next time.